Picture a bathroom door with a lock on it, not a grand door. A thin, hollow-core door in a small pink-tiled bathroom in a house that looks exactly like the house on either side of it, in a suburb that did not exist 10 years ago. Now fill the room behind that door with the smell of ammonia, sharp enough to make your eyes water at 4 feet. Add a woman kneeling on cold tile with rubber gloves that are slightly too big for her hands. Add a kitchen timer wrapped in a washcloth so it won't be heard ticking through the door. Add a flattened cardboard box hidden inside a folded newspaper, waiting to be buried at the bottom of the trash can, under the coffee grounds, where her husband will never ever look. That's an American bathroom on a Tuesday night in 1956. The door is locked. The woman is 39 years old. Her scalp is starting to burn just a little, which the instructions say is normal, and what she is doing in that room she will deny, cheerfully, smoothly, without blinking, for the rest of her life. Here is the strange part. 20 years earlier, almost no American woman would have dared do what she's doing. 20 years later, most of them will be doing it. Somewhere in between, something happened. Something with a name attached to it, and an office address, and a year. Because women did not always hide their grey. For most of American history, grey hair on a woman was simply hair. Your grandmother had it. The minister's wife had it. It arrived when it arrived, the way winter arrives, and nobody locked a door over it. Then, in the space of a single generation, grey became something else, a failure, a confession, a thing to be caught with. And the hiding of it became a second, deeper secret, because the only thing more shameful than going grey was being caught doing something about it. Somebody built that trap, not nature, not husbands, though they were recruited, not even vanity, which is old as skin. It was built piece by piece over about 100 years, by chemists in kitchens, by salesmen with sample cases, by a poison that blinded women in the 1930s, and finally, decisively, by one copywriter in a New York office in 1956, a woman who understood shame from the inside and figured out how to sell around it, and in doing so sold it deeper. Tonight we're going back down that whole road. Not as historians squinting at advertisements under glass, we're living it. 1 century, one locked door at a time. Everything those women saw, smelled, paid, risked and lied about. And before we start, one thing, so we're honest with each other. Everything in this story that carries a date is real. The products are real, the poisons are real, the prices are close, the slogans are quoted word for word, and the chemists and the copywriter you're going to meet are documented people whose lives you can look up. But the ordinary women whose eyes I'll lend you along the way, the merchant's wife, the shop girl, the housewife on the pink tile, they are composites, stitched together from the kind of lives those years actually held. The rooms are real, the eyes are borrowed. I'll always tell you which is which. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who like drifting off to the sound of lead combs and kitchen timers muffled under washcloths. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. Start with the world before the trap. You have to see it, or nothing that comes after makes sense. It is October of 1871, and you are 44 years old, and this morning in the mirror of your bedroom on a quiet street in Brooklyn, you counted the grey hairs at your left temple. There are more than you can count now. That's the truth of it. A year ago there were 9. You knew, because you counted the way you count the silver spoons after a dinner party. Now the grey has stopped being individual hairs and become a region. A streak, your sister calls it, and she says it kindly. and you could slap her anyway. You're not, by the standards of your street, a vain woman. You're the wife of a dry goods merchant. You have buried 2 children and raised 4. Your hands smell of the brown soap you still make yourself, out of habit, though you could buy it now. And you would tell anyone who asked, nobody asks, that a woman's looks are the least of her, that handsome is as handsome does. But you keep counting the grey hairs. And here is what you need to understand about your world. The world of 1871. You have no respectable way to do anything about them. None. And when I say no respectable way, I need you to understand what that means in 1871. This isn't a matter of fashion, of what's in or out this season. This is a matter of what kind of woman you are. Because in your world, there is a word for women who colour their hair, and the word is not fashionable. The word spoken in parlours with a small pause before it is painted. A painted woman. It sits in the same drawer as rouged cheeks and darkened eyes, and that drawer has a label on it, and the label says actress, or worse than actress, and everyone knows what's worse than actress, and nobody says it in front of the children. 3 years ago, in the autumn of 1868, a theatrical troupe arrived in New York from England and put that label on a poster. Lydia Thompson and her British Blondes. Real women, on a real stage at Wood's Museum on Broadway, in tights, with hair the colour of brass in gaslight. Golden in a way that God does not make grown women golden, and everyone in the audience knew it. And that was the point. The city lost its mind. The papers scolded, and the theatres filled. Ministers preached against them by name. Respectable men went twice. You never saw them yourself. Brooklyn, 41 years old, a funeral that season. But you heard about them from women who lowered their voices, and the lowered voices told you everything. That hair was dyed. Everyone said so. Dyed hair meant that kind of woman. The equation was written in public, in gaslight, in tights, and every wife in New York did the arithmetic. So the rule of your world is simple, and it has the weight of scripture behind it, because it is scripture. Proverbs chapter 16. The hoary head is a crown of glory. Your minister has said those exact words from the pulpit, looking out over a congregation of grey and greying women, and the women nodded. Grey hair is God's timekeeping. To paint over it is to lie. Not a small lie. A lie to the Almighty about what season you're in. That's the official position. That is what every respectable woman in your pew believes, or says she believes. Now come with me to the back of Mr. Aldrich's pharmacy on Fulton Street, and let me show you what they actually do. It's a narrow shop, 20 feet deep, maybe 11 wide, and it smells of camphor and licorice and beeswax and the cold iron smell of the scale weights. Up front in the window are the respectable things, soda powders, court plaster, tooth soap. But along the back wall, on the second shelf from the top, high enough that you have to ask, stands a row of bottles with beautiful labels, and the labels are a masterclass in the first great invention of this whole story. Not a chemical invention, a verbal one. Because not one of those bottles says dye, they say restorer. Mrs. S.A. Allen's World's Hair Restorer, one of the most advertised bottles in America. $1 the bottle when your hired girl earns perhaps 6 a week. Aya's Hair Vigor, in glass the colour of a church window. A dozen others from a dozen cities, all promising the same miracle in the same careful grammar. This preparation does not colour the hair, madam. It restores it. It awakens the natural pigment. It returns what time has merely misplaced. That word, restore, is doing an enormous amount of work, and you should notice it, because you will meet its grandchildren later tonight. A dye is what an actress uses. A restorative is practically a medicine. A dye is deception. Restoration is healing. Nothing in the bottle changed. Only the sentence round the bottle changed, and the sentence is what lets a deacon's wife carry it home. Now let me tell you what is actually in some of those bottles, and in the other quiet thing Mr. Aldrich keeps below the counter, wrapped in tissue, which is not a bottle at all. It is a comb, heavier than a comb should be, with a dull grey gleam where the teeth have worn bright. A lead comb. You draw it through your hair slowly every night, and the lead, with sulphur, with time, darkens the grey gradually the way a stain spreads. Gradually is the whole sales pitch. Gradual means deniable. No one wakes up Tuesday with black hair who was silver on Monday. The change creeps in over weeks, and if a neighbour squints, well, the light in this parlour was always poor. And many of the restorers in those lovely bottles work the same way, because a good number of them are sugar of lead, lead acetate, dissolved with sulphur in water and perfume. You are, in the most literal sense, combing poison into your scalp above your ears, a few grains at a time, night after night, for years. Does anyone know it's dangerous? In the way people know things they don't want to know, yes. Doctors write letters to journals about tremors, about wrist drop, about headaches in ladies with suspiciously youthful hair. The word saturnine gets used, but the bottles are cheap, the change is slow, the alternative is being old in public, and the letters are in journals that no one on Fulton Street reads. And if not lead, there is silver. Nitrate of silver, the same salt the photographers use, sold in twin bottles as an instantaneous dye for the truly desperate. It works. It also keeps working. Silver-dyed hair goes flat and metallic, and in strong sunlight it can drift toward colours hair has never been. A greenish cast, a purple sheen, like oil on a puddle, and it stains the skin at the hairline a brown that soap will not touch, so that the very thing meant to hide the secret becomes the mark that announces it. There are women in this city walking under parasols not for their complexions but for their chemistry. So here is your position on this October evening in 1871, and I want you to feel how tight it is. You may go grey and be a crown of glory and watch your husband's eyes travel. They do travel. You have watched them travel toward whatever is younger and browner-haired across a dinner table. Or you may buy the bottle or the comb and poison yourself slowly and lie about it and live with the low hum of maybe they can tell every time you step into strong light. That's the whole menu. 2 items. You buy the comb. I'll tell you that plainly, because pretending otherwise would be a prettier story and a falser one. You buy it on a Thursday, and you pay for it with the egg money, and Mr. Aldrich wraps it without meeting your eyes, which is his professional courtesy and the closest thing to absolution on offer. And that night, with the door shut, you draw it through the grey at your left temple, slowly, 20 strokes, and you feel... what? Shame. Yes. But under the shame, something worse. Something with teeth. Relief. Remember this comb. The heaviness of it in the hand, the wrong coldness of the metal. 60 years from now, a comb like it is going to sit in a glass case in Washington, in an exhibition with a name like a carnival attraction, as evidence. We'll be there when it happens, but first the world has to invent something better than lead, and something worse than shame. It invents them in the same half-century, and it starts, of all places, at a World's Fair in Paris. In the summer of 1867, 4 years before you bought that comb, Paris held an exposition universelle on the Champ de Mars, a fairground of machines and empires, the kind of place where the 19th century went to show off to itself. And somewhere among the exhibits, a pharmacist named E.H. Thiele and a hairdresser named Leon Hugo demonstrated something with a name like water and a temper like fire. Hydrogen peroxide. Applied to dark hair, it didn't coat the hair the way lead and silver did. It reached inside the strand and burned the colour out of it, lightened it, gilded it. And unlike every trick before it, it was permanent because it didn't add a pigment that could wash away or wear off. It destroyed pigment that could never come back. Nobody at the fair used the word that mattered, so I'll use it for them. This was the first modern hair chemistry. Everything in your bathroom tonight, every box on every drugstore shelf in America, is descended from that demonstration the way you're descended from your grandmother. Peroxide crossed the ocean fast, because everything profitable does. By the 1880s, a French-born chemist in New York named Charles Marchand was selling it in bottles, and his golden hair wash became the not quite respectable staple of the Gilded Age. The bottle that made peroxide blonde a phrase, and then an insult, and then a category of woman. Because notice what did not change. The chemistry improved, and the shame stayed exactly where it was. Peroxide hair had a tell, a hot brassy sunset orange note that natural blondes don't have, especially where the dose was clumsy, and the whole city could read it. Chorus girls used it. Women in certain professions used it, which meant that a schoolteacher couldn't, no matter what the bottle could do, because the question was never what the bottle could do. The question was what the bottle said about you. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because it is the engine of this entire story. For 100 years, hair colour technology keeps solving the wrong problem. The chemists keep making the products safer, faster, better, and the products keep not selling to ordinary women, because ordinary women are not afraid of the chemicals. They are afraid of being seen. No formula in a bottle addresses that. Someone is eventually going to solve the scene problem, and she won't work in a laboratory. But before anyone solves anything, things get worse, much worse, because the next gift of the chemical age is not a bleach, but a true dye, and it comes out of coal. Follow me forward into the new century and borrow a new set of eyes. It is 1922 now, and you are 26 years old. And you work 6 days a week as a manicurist in a beauty parlour off Herald Square in Manhattan. A long, hot, bright room that smells of singed hair, orange flower water, cigarette smoke, and the sharp chemical bite that everyone who works here has stopped noticing and every customer notices at the door. The bob has arrived. Half the women in New York, it seems, have cut off their hair, and the other half have opinions about it. Business has never been better, and in the back of the parlour, behind a curtain the colour of weak tea, is the dyeing chair. The dyes are new, newish. The molecule at the heart of them was pulled out of coal tar by chemists back in the 1860s, and by the early years of this century it was being bottled for hair under gentle trade names. Paraphenylenediamine, if you want the whole mouthful. The girls here just call it the dark bottle, and credit where it is due. It works like nothing before it ever worked. It doesn't coat the hair like lead, doesn't go metallic like silver, doesn't scream brass like cheap peroxide. It develops inside the hair shaft, oxidizing slowly into a brown or black. That light passes through the way it passes through natural hair. A grey-streaked woman of 50 walks behind that curtain, and 2 hours later a chestnut-haired woman of 50 walks out, and in decent light, From across a room, you honestly cannot tell. You also cannot tell, and this is the part your parlour does not print on any card, which customers it is quietly going to hurt. Because coal tar dye has a flaw, and the flaw is that some bodies declare war on it. A sensitization, the doctors call it. A woman can take the dark bottle 5 times, 10 times, with nothing but a faint prickle at the scalp, and the 11th time her face swells until her eyes are slits. You have seen it once, and once was enough. A regular customer, a widow who ran a boarding house, back in the parlour 2 days after her colour, her eyelids like risen dough, weeping from pain and from something worse than pain, which was that she could not tell her boarders what was wrong with her, because then she would have to say what she'd done. She sat in the back room with cold compresses, hidden behind the tea-coloured curtain, hiding from her own life, and the owner spoke to her in a low voice, and no doctor was called, because she begged that no doctor be called. Her secret mattered more to her than her face. Write that down somewhere in your mind. The whole century is in that sentence. Now here is the fact that should genuinely keep you awake, so I'll say it flat. In 1922, in the United States of America, there is no law, none, that says a hair dye has to be safe. The famous Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, the one that cleaned up the meat packers and the medicine men, covers food and covers drugs, and cosmetics are neither. A bottle can contain lead, silver, coal tar, or sink cleaner, and no federal officer in the country has the authority to take it off the shelf until after it has done whatever it is going to do. The beauty business in the 1920s is a boom market with the legal oversight of a carnival midway, and it is growing by millions of dollars a year, and the women funding that growth are, legally speaking, the test animals. It takes a catastrophe to change a law. The catastrophe arrives in 1933, and it goes for the eyes. The product was called Lash Lure. You could find it that year in beauty shops and department store counters. An aniline dye, that same coal tar family, mixed strong and sold for tinting eyelashes and brows, because the fashion pages that season wanted lashes like black lace. The trouble is arithmetic. A solution mild enough to insult the scalp can devastate an eye. Across the country, women sat back in chairs for a beauty treatment and stood up burned. Ulcerated corneas, eyes swollen shut, then scarred. More than a dozen women blinded, in whole or in part. One case written up with photographs that federal officials would carry around for years. A woman whose before picture shows her smiling at a social club event, and whose after picture does not show her eyes at all. And one woman, infected after treatment, died of it. And the Food and Drug Administration could do nothing. Not a recall, not a seizure, nothing. Cosmetics were not theirs to touch. So the agency did the only thing left to a bureaucracy with no teeth. It made an exhibit. A travelling display of bottles and jars that the law could not reach, with the photographs of what they had done. The Lash Lure faces, Caremlu, a depilatory cream built on thallium, rat poison's cousin, that was crippling the women who rubbed it on. The lead and silver restorers, your Combs whole poisoned family, still on sale 60 years after your Brooklyn pharmacist wrapped one in tissue. Reporters walked through it and gave it the name that stuck, the American Chamber of Horrors. Eleanor Roosevelt herself toured the tables and came away shaken, and said so publicly. A campaigning FDA writer, Ruth DeForest Lamb, put it all in a furious book by that same name in 1936. And here is the bitter joke of it. Even then, even with the photographs, Congress sat on its hands for years more. It finally moved in 1938, and honestly, It moved then mostly because of a different horror, a liquid medicine called elixir sulfanilamide that had killed more than 100 people, many of them children, the autumn before. Grief does what evidence couldn't. The Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1938 put cosmetics under federal law for the first time in American history. Eyelash dyes like Lash Lure were finished. The old poisons began slowly to come off the shelves. But read the fine print of that 1938 law, because the fine print is where our story lives. Coal tar hair dyes, the dark bottle, the one product everyone in Washington knew could hurt people, were specifically exempted. Too big to ban, too popular to police. Instead, Congress required a warning. Every package must carry a caution. This product contains ingredients that may cause skin irritation. A preliminary test should first be made, the patch test. A dab of the mixture on the skin, 24 hours of waiting before every single application forever. So look at what the law of the land has just done in 1938, without quite meaning to. It has said, in official federal language, this thing women do to their hair is real, it is common, it is dangerous enough to require a printed warning, and it is legal. It is for the first time ordinary enough to regulate. Hair dye has stopped being a carnival potion. It is now a product with rules, like aspirin. The chemistry is nearly ready. The law is ready. The shame hasn't moved an inch since Lydia Thompson wore tights at Wood's Museum. In 1938, respectable American women still do not dye their hair, or rather, the ones who do would sooner be robbed than admit it. Something like 9 women in 10 wouldn't touch it. The whole apparatus is built and waiting, like a stage set with the lights off. Now we have to go back 30 years and pick up the other thread, the one that's been winding toward us from Paris this whole time. Because while America was poisoning and litigating, a young man in a 2-room apartment near the Tuileries was inventing the future of this story over a kitchen stove, at night, in his shirt sleeves, and his name is the first of the 3 names you were promised. Paris, 1907. Borrow one more pair of eyes, a hairdresser's eyes this time. You are 31 years old and you rent a narrow salon on a side street in the 9th arrondissement. 3 chairs, 2 of them usually empty in the mornings, a stove in the corner that never quite warms the far wall. Your hands are what 20 years of this trade make them. Nicked at the knuckles from hot tongs, stained at the fingertips a permanent walnut brown, because walnut hull is one of the things you dye with, along with henna out of paper sacks that smell like cut hay, and the coal tar bottles from the supply house that you use carefully and charge double for and privately do not trust. Your dyeing clients come early or late, never at noon. Noon is for haircuts and Marcel waves, things a woman can be seen having done. The colour clients slip in at 8 in the morning with their collars up, or at 7 at night when the street is going blue, and they pay in cash, and more than one of them has given you over the years a false name, as if you couldn't see her real name in the shape of her face, as if it mattered. You keep their secrets the way a confessor keeps them. It is, you sometimes think, half of what they're paying for. In Paris, as in Brooklyn, the arithmetic is the same. The dye is a product, but the silence is the service. And then there is the young man with the sample case. He first turns up on a wet Tuesday, and your first thought is that he's too young to be selling anything. Mid-20s, big-shouldered, an Alsatian baker's son by his accent and his hands. Hands that look wrong on a salesman because they look like they'd rather be working. His name is Eugène Schueller. He is a chemist, A real one, trained at the Institute of Applied Chemistry in Paris, and until recently he had a respectable laboratory post and a future in academia, and he has thrown over the Sorbonne. His family thinks he's mad to do this, to stand in small salons in the rain and sell hairdressers a hair dye he cooks up himself at night on the stove of his 2-room flat and bottles by hand and carries out in the morning before most of the city has had its coffee. He calls the dye Aureal after a hairstyle, a halo of hair. He will call the company he founds in 1909, on a few hundred francs in that same cramped beginning, the French Society of Inoffensive Hair Dyes, which tells you exactly what he thought the market was afraid of. Say the name of what that little company becomes a century on, and you have said the name of the largest beauty company on earth, L'Oréal. But tonight, in 1907, he's just a tired young man opening a case on your counter, and what should stop you, what does stop you, because you're good at your trade, is the bottles themselves. There are shades, not dark and darker, the way the supply house dyes come, but a graded run of browns and blacks and near golds, numbered, repeatable, so that the chestnut a woman leaves with in October is the same chestnut she can leave with in March. He talks about the chemistry the way other men talk about horses, dilutions, developers, timing, and he says the word safe the way a man says a thing he has staked his life on. Inoffensive, harmless. He knows exactly what the dark bottles have been doing to faces. His entire wager, the wager that costs him his professorship and his sleep, is that the future of this furtive back-curtain false-name trade is respectability, and that respectability is built out of consistency and safety. One numbered bottle at a time. You buy 3 bottles, partly because the chemistry convinces you, partly because it is raining, and he has the look of a man who has eaten lightly this week. You are not the only one. Salon by salon, year by year, the young man's bottles spread through Paris, then through France. He works, by every account that survives, like a man possessed, chemist at dawn, salesman by day, bookkeeper by night, sleeping a few hours in the flat that is also the factory. There's a detail from those early years that I love because it's so unglamorous. The whole operation, invention, production, sales, accounts, is essentially one man and a stove and a sink. At the same moment that hair dye in America is a carnival of poisons with nobody's real name on the label, here is a man who puts his name on it. That, in 1907, in this trade, is nearly the whole revolution by itself. And notice what Schueller is actually selling, because it is subtler than dye. The supply house bottle says, "Transform yourself and hope." His numbered bottles say, "Nothing will happen to you. Nothing unexpected, nothing visible, nothing anyone can point at." He is selling predictability to frightened women through the hands of hairdressers they already trust. He has understood, before anyone else in this story, that the customer's real enemy is not grey hair. It is surprise. Hold that thought. An ocean away and a generation later, an American copywriter is going to take that exact insight and carve it into a single sentence so effective it will still be quoted 100 years on. But she needs a product to say it about, and the product needs to cross the Atlantic first. It crosses in 1931, in the luggage, so to speak, of a honeymooning chemist from New York. His name is Lawrence Gelb. Remember it. The second of your 3 names. He is a New York chemical entrepreneur. a young man who has already made and half lost money in the way of the 20s, and in 1931, the pit of the Depression, banks folding like tents, a quarter of the country sliding toward breadlines. He is travelling in France with his wife, Joan, who is sharp about the beauty business in her own right. And in France they come across something American salons simply do not have, a hair colour preparation used in French salons, gentler than the harsh American dyes, an oil-based tint that colours the hair and leaves it soft, leaves it, in a word, natural looking. The preparation is called Clairol. Gelb does what a certain kind of man does with his last good idea in a bad year. He bets everything on it. He secures the rights, brings Clairol home to New York, and founds a company around it, Clairol Incorporated, and spends the 1930s doing exactly what Schueller did in 1907, except in English and in a depression, hauling sample cases into beauty salons, city after city, demonstrating the tint on live models, talking safety, talking shades, talking natural, to hairdressers who had spent their careers behind the tea-coloured curtain, apologising for their own product. The pitch works for the same reason it worked in Paris. Hairdressers don't want to run a confessional. They want to run a business. Give them a colour that doesn't scream, and the whisper trade can grow. And it does grow, but look closely at the shape of the growth, because the shape is the whole point. Through the 30s and the war years, Clairol becomes a salon success, a professional success. The number of American women colouring their hair creeps upward, but it stays a minority, a small minority, single digits out of 100, and it stays inside the salon, behind the curtain, inside the professional hush. The war actually helps in its sideways fashion. With 16 million men gone and women running lathes and payrolls and ration books, looking done becomes a kind of home front morale duty, lipstick practically patriotic. But dye is still not lipstick. Lipstick washes off at night, and everyone can see you wearing it, and that's precisely why it's innocent. Dye stays. Dye lies. Dye is still the thing woman does not admit. By the late 1940s, Lawrence Gelb has concluded something that sounds obvious now and was heresy then. The future isn't the salon at all, it's the home. If a woman could colour her own hair in her own bathroom, with the door locked, if the confessional could be moved inside her house, where the only witness is the mirror, the market would not grow by half. It would grow by 10 times. There is only one problem, and it is technical. Salon colour in the 1940s is a two-step ordeal. Lift the colour out with bleach, then put new colour in. 2 processes, 2 chances to go orange, a job for a professional. The way setting a broken arm is a job for a professional. Nobody's grandmother is doing that over a bathroom sink. So Clairol's chemists, with Gelb's son Richard and the company's laboratory men grinding at it through the late 40s, build a thing the whole century has been waiting for. A formula that lightens and colours in a single step. 1 bottle, 1 application, 20 minutes. A lathering tint you could genuinely use at home over a sink. They call it, with a gentleness that is its own kind of genius, not a dye, not a tint, but a bath. Miss Clairol Hair Colour Bath, and in 1950, at the International Beauty Show in New York, the industry's great annual gathering, hall after hall of hairdressers who believe they have seen everything, Clairol demonstrates it in public, live. Understand what the audience is looking at. A grey-haired model sits down. The preparation goes on, in front of everyone. No tricks, no curtain. The curtain is the whole point. There is no curtain. And in the time it takes the audience to grow restless, roughly the time of a coffee break. The grey is gone, evenly, credibly, no brass, no streaks, touched by nothing natural. Hairdressers stand up to see. Some of them, the trade paper said, wouldn't believe it and came back to the next demonstration to watch again, close up, looking for the trick. There is no trick. 70 years of chemistry. Paris, 1867, the coal tar bottles, Schueller's stove, Gelb's sample case, has finally arrived at the thing itself. Hair colour that cannot be detected and cannot be botched. For sale to anyone with $1 or $2 in a sink. And now, watch what happens next, because this is the hinge of the whole story. What happens next is not much. The product is a marvel, and the market barely moves. Through the early 1950s, home hair colour sells to the women who were already dying, who now do it more cheaply. But the great sea of American women, the church pew women, the school gate women, the women who watched their mothers go grey and are watching themselves go grey in bathroom mirrors from Pasadena to Providence. They do not come. Around 7 women in 100 are colouring their hair in the mid-1950s. 7 after Miss Clairol, after the one-step miracle. The chemists have done everything chemistry can do, and the number sits at 7, because chemistry was never the problem. The problem is the question. The question a woman imagines in every eye at every church supper and PTA meeting and dinner table. Has she dyed it? The problem is 1871 in Brooklyn. The problem is the painted woman drawer. The problem is that the product works perfectly and buying it is still a confession. Somebody has to kill the question itself, not answer it, kill it. The person who kills it is a 48-year-old copywriter in the New York office of the advertising agency Foot, Cone and Belding. She is the only woman writing copy there. Her name, the third name, the name this whole night has been driving toward, is Shirley Polykoff. To understand what she did, you have to understand where she learned it, and she learned it the way everyone in this story learns everything. At home, the hard way, with the door closed. Shirley Polykoff was born in Brooklyn in 1908, the same borough where, 37 years earlier, our merchant's wife carried a lead comb home in tissue paper. Her parents were Jewish immigrants from the Russian Empire, and she grew up in the immigrant Brooklyn of pushcarts and piecework and English learned at school and corrected at home. A world with an exact, practical understanding of what appearances cost and what they buy. She went to work young, retail advertising, department stores, women's magazines, writing the small, urgent prose of hemlines and housewares, and she was good at it. Good in the specific way of someone who actually likes the women she's writing to. And from the time she was a young woman, she lightened her hair. Golden blonde, kept golden by artifice, and she saw no sin in it at all. In her telling, being blonde was simply part of the person she'd decided to be, the confident American girl she was inventing from the materials at hand. The bottle wasn't a lie. The bottle was the truth about who she intended to become. Then came the dinner that put a sentence into history. As a young woman, she was brought home to meet the family of the man she would marry. George Halperin, a lawyer, the son of an Orthodox rabbi. The evening went well, she thought, and afterward, her future mother-in-law delivered her verdict. She delivered it in Yiddish to her son, in the way of mothers-in-law everywhere, not quite far enough out of earshot. And what she asked him, as Polykoff herself told the story for the rest of her life, in interviews and in her own memoir, was this. Does she paint her hair? Färbt sie die Haar? Oder färbt sie nicht? Does she colour her hair, or doesn't she? Feel the sentence from inside for a moment. It isn't a question about hair. Everyone at that table could see the hair. It's a question about character, asked in the old language, by the keeper of the family's respectability, about a girl who wanted in. It carries 1871 inside it, and the painted woman drawer and the crown of glory sermon compressed into 6 words and a raised eyebrow. Shirley Polykoff heard it, heard the doubt of her, the audit of her, and she was stung by it, and she never forgot it. She carried that question around for 25 years, the way you carry a splinter you can't quite reach. And then in 1955, the advertising agency Foote, Cone and Belding won the Clairol account and handed it to the only woman copywriter on staff, and the splinter came out. Picture the problem as it landed on her desk, because as advertising problems go, it was close to unsolvable. Client: Miss Clairol Hair Colour Bath, the finest hair colouring product ever offered to the public. Obstacle: the public will not buy it, because buying it is an admission, and an admission is social death. You cannot say our dye is better, because the word dye loses the sale in one syllable. You cannot say no one will know, because that admits there's something to know. The wink is a confession with lipstick on. Every straight line into the subject sets off the same trap. For decades, hair colour advertising had tiptoed around it and sold to the 7% who'd already made their peace. Polykoff's answer was not a straight line. It was a mirror turned around. The campaign she wrote, which Clairol launched in 1956, consisted at its heart of one question and one answer, 13 words in all, and you have heard them your whole life without perhaps ever noticing what they're doing. The question: does she or doesn't she? The answer: hair colour so natural only her hairdresser knows for sure. Her mother-in-law's question: word for word in spirit, half word for word in fact. The kitchen table audit of a woman's respectability, lifted whole, printed in magazines read by tens of millions. That is the first thing to see. She did not invent the question. America was already asking it in parlours and pews the way Brooklyn had asked it across a dinner table in Yiddish. All she did was ask it out loud, in public, in print, and then, with the second line, she did the thing that changed the market forever. She refused to answer it. Only her hairdresser knows for sure. Think about what that sentence actually performs. It does not say she colours her hair. It does not say she doesn't. It says, you will never know. It takes the question that had policed women for a century. Has she? And it doesn't argue with the question, doesn't shame the question, doesn't answer the question. It breaks the question's tool. The whole disciplinary power of has she depended on the answer being detectable, on brass, on streaks, on the flat metallic sheen, on the druggist's nod, on getting caught. Polykoff's line, wrapped around a product that genuinely could not be detected, told every woman in America, the evidence is gone. The trial can no longer be held. You can do this and remain, publicly, permanently, provably, the kind of woman who would never do this. She may die respectable by making it deniable. Read that again because it is the exact strange mechanism at the centre of tonight's story, and almost everyone remembers the slogan and almost no one notices the mechanism. The campaign did not fight the shame. It industrialized the secret. It said, the shame stays, the getting caught goes, which meant the price of coloured hair was no longer scandal. The price was merely a lie. a small, permanent, renewable lie, available at every drugstore for about $1.50. And then there was the picture. This is the second half of her genius, and it was just as deliberate. The woman in the "does she or doesn't she" advertisements was not a siren. Polykoff insisted on it. The woman in the picture was a wife, crisp and outdoorsy and clear-eyed, the woman who runs the bake sale, and beside her, in a D-after ad, was a child, her child, frequently a child whose hair matched hers, shade for shade, which is the visual argument delivered subliminally and perfectly. Hair this natural is hair a woman was born with. Hair beside a child is hair beyond suspicion. Shirley Polykoff put the peroxide question in the caption and a Madonna in the photograph, and the two together said what could never be said in words. Nice women do this now, the nicest women. Maybe the woman across the street, maybe your son's teacher. Does she or doesn't she? You'll never know, and if you can never know about her, then no one can ever know about you. The line was so sharp that it nearly cut the campaign's own throat before it ran. When the advertisements were submitted, Life magazine, the great gatekeeper, 40-some million readers, the magazine on every coffee table this story has ever visited, balked. The men at Life read, "Does she or doesn't she?" and saw an innuendo, a leer, a double meaning unfit for a family magazine. And here the story turns into a parable so neat that if it weren't documented I wouldn't dare tell it. The question was put to test. The women at the magazine were surveyed. Did they see a double meaning in the line? And the women, reading the words every woman in America had been dreading her whole adult life, saw no innuendo at all. They saw hair. Of course they saw hair. The question was about hair the way it had always been about hair, which is to say, about virtue, about age, about being found out, and not one of them mistook it for anything else. The men had heard a wink. The women had heard the mother-in-law. Life ran the campaign. What happened next happened faster than anything else in this 100-year story. When Foote, Cohn and Belding took the Clairol account in 1955, the client's advertising budget was around $400,000 a year. A modest account, a modest product, a 7% nation. The campaign broke in 1956, and the numbers began to move the way water moves when a dam fails politely. Clairol's sales multiplied over the following years, several times over within the decade by every account of the period. Drugstores that had kept the boxes low and discreet began building displays. Shades proliferated, and the shade names themselves were little masterworks of the new deniability. No scarlet flame, no midnight vamp, but moon gold, topaz, sparkling sherry. Names like weather, names you could say aloud at a church supper. By 1959, Clairol was valuable enough that the pharmaceutical giant Bristol Myers bought the company outright, and by the time Shirley Polykoff retired from the agency in 1973 as a senior vice president, one of the highest paid women in American advertising, this same woman who'd been audited in Yiddish across a dinner table. The Clairol advertising budget she had inherited at $400,000 a year stood at roughly $52 million. And the deepest number of all, the number that measures the whole century, the share of American women colouring their hair, stuck at roughly 7 in 100 when the campaign began, climbed through the late 50s, through the 60s, through the early 70s, to 40 in 100, and by some industry counts toward half, in one generation. Not because the chemistry changed. The chemistry was ready in 1950 and the number sat still, because the sentence changed. Tens of millions of American women started colouring their hair inside a single generation, and the instrument that moved them was 13 words written by a Brooklyn copywriter who had spent 25 years being angry at a question. So there, at the centre of the night, is your answer, named in full. Who shamed American women into hiding their grey? The chemists made it possible. Eugène Schueller over his stove in 1907, Lawrence and Joan Gelb hauling Clairol across the Atlantic in 1931, the laboratory men who folded two processes into one bottle in 1950. But the chemists only ever sold to the 7%. It was an advertising campaign, Shirley Polykoff's campaign, at Foot, Cone and Belding for Miss Clairol beginning in 1956, that moved the nation, and it moved the nation not by lifting the shame but by perfecting the hiding. Does she, or doesn't she, did not free women from the question. It armed them against it, and left the question standing, patrolling every hairline in America, forever unanswered and forever asked. The price of that bargain was paid in bathrooms. Millions of them. Let's go back to one. The pink-tiled one, the locked one, the one we started in. We never actually met her properly, the woman on her knees by the tub in 1956. It's time we did, because the second half of this story belongs to the women who lived inside the sentence. So borrow her eyes now. You're 39 years old, and you live in one of the new suburbs on Long Island, in a house your husband's veteran's loan bought in 1949, on a street where every lawn is the same width, and every kitchen faces the same direction, and everyone knows what time everyone else's wash goes on the line. You found your first grey hair at 33 at the Crown, and did what your mother did. Nothing. By 37, the grey had moved from event to condition, and at 38, you can date it precisely because a woman dates these things precisely. Came the afternoon at the supermarket when the young clerk, bagging your groceries, friendly as a puppy, said, "Help you to the car with these, ma'am," in the exact voice, the exact pitch and padding of voice that he would have used for his grandmother. You stood in the parking lot with your bags and did arithmetic. Your husband is 41. At the office they have started calling him a young man on his way up, and it is understood that his best decade is just beginning. You're 39, and a boy with a paper hat has just filed you with the grandmothers. Same decade of life, different species of time. Men, in the going phrase of your world, go silver at the temples and become distinguished. There is no word for what women become, or rather, there is, and the word is less. You'd seen the advertisement, of course. Everyone had seen the advertisement. It was in Life, between the war news and the cake mixes. The question in those coy italics, the wholesome woman, the child leaning at her shoulder with the same bright hair. Does she, or doesn't she? You had read it 4 times over 4 months, the way you might walk past a door 4 times before trying whether it's locked. And what finally moved you was not the slogan, not really. It was the woman across the street. Her name doesn't matter. Call her the woman with the roses, since her front bed is the envy of the block. She is your age. You have seen her driver's license. You were born the same spring. And in 3 years of coffee and casseroles and children's birthday parties, her hair has stayed exactly, precisely, suspiciously, the same warm brown. Not one thread of grey. You have looked, in sunlight, in the yellow light of her kitchen, at the hairline, at the part everywhere the truth pulls first, and there is nothing to find. Which means one of 2 things. Either she is lucky in a way that borders on rude, or she does it and it cannot be detected, and she has been sitting across a kitchen table from you for 3 years, smiling undetected while the clerk with the paper hat files you with the grandmothers. Does she or doesn't she? You genuinely cannot tell, and the day you understood that you couldn't tell was the day the advertisement finished its work on you. Because if you can't tell about her, then no one on this street could ever tell about you. The proof of the product was walking around the neighborhood watering roses. Every undetectable head of hair in America was a free advertisement for the possibility of every other one. That is what Shirley Polykoff built, a machine that ran on doubt and refueled itself. So on a Thursday in October of 1956, you drive to a drugstore. Not your drugstore. Let's be precise about the geography of shame. Your drugstore is 8 minutes away, staffed by a pharmacist who knows your children's ear infections by year. The drugstore you drive to is 25 minutes away, 2 towns over, where nobody knows your lawn. You wear gloves and your good coat, the way you would dress for the city. You have thought about this trip the way your husband thinks about a client meeting. The display is at the end of the cosmetics aisle, and it startles you. It's respectable, bright, orderly, out in the open. A little cardboard gallery of those wholesome question mark women, and rows of boxes in shades with names like jewellery, moon gold, topaz, sparkling sherry. You stand at 4 feet's distance, reading the boxes sideways, ready at any second to be a woman examining shampoo. Another customer turns into the aisle. You pick up a hairbrush and study its bristles with the concentration of a jeweller until she passes. Then, in one motion you've rehearsed in your mind since Tuesday, you take the box in the shade called chestnut brown, nearest to what the hall mirror remembers, and set it in your basket and cover it gently with a hairbrush and a bottle of hand lotion, the way you'd cover a sleeping child. It costs about $1.50. A salon would charge many times that, and a salon has a receptionist, and a receptionist has a voice, and a voice carries. The clerk at the register is a girl of 19 who could not care less, and rings it through without a flicker, and some part of you is almost offended that the most dangerous purchase of your year is, to her, a Thursday. The box rides home on the floor of the car, under the road maps. In the house, it goes into the one drawer that is yours alone, under the winter scarves, to wait for the right night. The right night comes 10 days later. Your husband at a lodge dinner, the children at your mother's. The instructions unfold like a road map themselves, dense and slightly terrifying. And near the top, in small print, is the sentence federal law put there in 1938. The caution, the patch test, the dab behind the ear, and the 24 hours. You are a careful woman. You did the patch test. 3 days ago, a dot of mixture behind your left ear, checked hourly like a sleeping baby. Nothing. All clear. Even your caution had to be hidden. You wore your hair down over the spot for 2 days, and now it's the bathroom, the locked door, the kneeling on tile. You mix the bottle and the ammonia reaches up and grabs the back of your throat, and your eyes stream, and you think, absurdly, of onions, of crying at onions, of how many things a woman does at a sink with her eyes streaming. The gloves are too big. The applicator shakes a little. Your hands, not the bottle. Section by section. Hairline first. The way the diagram shows, the crown, the temples, the widow's peak, that betraying seam of the part. The tint is cold, then warm. The prickle on the scalp arrives just as the instructions promised. Normal, they said, and you repeat the word to yourself. Normal, normal. and the kitchen timer wrapped in its washcloth ticks like a small muffled heart on the edge of the tub. 20 minutes. You spend them sitting on the bathroom floor with your back against the tub in rubber gloves and your oldest housecoat, listening for cars in the driveway, feeling your own scalp tingle, thinking about the woman with the roses, wondering, and you will laugh at this later. Or something like laughing. Whether behind her locked door on some other Thursday she sat on this same tile, in this same posture, listening for you. The rinse runs brown, then amber, then almost clear. The towel, an old one, chosen days ago for this duty and this duty only, chestnut stained now beyond any excuse, goes to the bottom of the hamper, under everything, and will eventually go to the rag bag in the garage where no one but you ever looks. The box, the bottle, the gloves, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, carried out the side door in the dark, buried in the trash can under the coffee grounds and the chicken bones. You've committed no crime. You've never felt more like a criminal. Standing at the trash can in the dark in your housecoat, patting coffee grounds over a cardboard box, you are every woman in this story at once. The merchant's wife with her egg money, the boarding house widow behind the tea-coloured curtain, the false names in a Paris ledger. The products got better for 90 years. The posture at the trash can never changed. And then you go inside and dry your hair and look. I won't pretend the moment isn't real, because it is real, and it is the reason this industry conquered the world. The grey is gone, not painted over, gone, the way a sound stops. The woman in the mirror is not younger exactly. She is something more precise. She is unremarkable again. No clerk will pitch his voice at her. No eye will snag and file her. She's been returned to the general population. You stand at the mirror a long time, turning your head under the light, hunting for the tell the way you hunted at the hairline of the woman with the roses, and there is nothing to find, and your chest does something between a laugh and a sob, quietly, alone, in a locked bathroom, which is where this century keeps all its best feelings. Your husband comes home at 11. He kisses your cheek, says the lodge ran long, hangs his coat. At the doorway of the kitchen he pauses, a half second, a flicker, his eyes moving over you the way eyes move over a room where some small thing is different. A moved chair, a new bulb. You look nice, he says. Do something different. New rinse, you say. 2 words, not a lie. The box itself blessed them. Bath. Rinse. The industry has been laundering this vocabulary since Mrs. Allen's World's Hair Restorer promised restoration, not dye, to your great-grandmother's generation. He nods, satisfied, and opens the icebox, and that is the entire conversation, and you stand at the counter with your heart going like the muffled timer, having just enrolled in a program of concealment that will last, though you don't know it tonight, the rest of your life. Because here is what the box does not say, and what every woman finds out at the 4-week mark. Hair grows. About 1/2 inch a month, every month forever, and it grows out grey from the root. A bright silver seam widening along your part like dawn under a door. The dye is permanent, but the deception is perishable, and its shelf life is 28 days. So there will be another Thursday, and another box under another hairbrush, and another muffled timer, 13 times a year, every year from now on. Miss it by a week and the seam shows, and the seam is worse than grey, because grey is only age, but the seam is proof. Proof of the doing, the thing itself catchable at last. You do not yet know how long you will keep this appointment with yourself, that you will keep it through 2 more decades, through a presidency and a war and your daughter's wedding, that no one in your family will ever once say the word die aloud in your presence, and that everyone, eventually, in the wordless way of families, will know. Tonight there is only the clean feeling of having gotten away with it, and under that, faint but permanent, like the ammonia smell that takes 3 days to fully leave the bathroom, the knowledge that getting away with it is now a job. You've just taken it. It has no wages, no holidays, and no retirement, and you are not alone in it. That is the strangest part, the part historians would marvel at later. Up and down your street, in 1956, 1957, 1958, women are taking the same job, one locked bathroom at a time, each believing she is the only one. The nation is filling with a secret that everyone keeps and no one shares. Millions of women, 13 Thursdays a year, all listening for cars in the driveway, all patting coffee grounds over cardboard, all inspecting each other at kitchen tables and finding nothing, and concluding each one that she alone is the fraud among the naturals. The question ran the machine, does she or doesn't she? And the machine's great trick was to make every woman a spy and a fugitive at once, searching every other hairline for the crime she was committing herself. An entire economy grew up to service that secret, and nobody profited from it more strangely than the one figure the slogan itself had sworn into the conspiracy. The keeper of the confessional, the profession named in the second line. Only her hairdresser knows for sure. So borrow one more working pair of hands. It is 1959, and you are 46 years old, and you have owned a beauty shop in Queens for 11 years. 4 chairs, 2 dryers with hoods like astronaut helmets, a front window with your name in gold paint, and a smell you stopped smelling a decade ago. Setting lotion, cigarette smoke, coffee, and underneath everything, faint and eternal, ammonia. Your hands are a hairdresser's hands, which is to say a historical document. Nails cut to nothing, a burn scar from a permanent wave machine that dates you like a tree ring, and along the sides of both forefingers, a faint tan stain that no pumice will lift, the professional tattoo of 30 years of other women's colour. You know things about the women of this neighbourhood that their husbands do not know, their doctors do not know, their priests hear only edited versions of. You know who went grey at 29. You know whose warm brown arrives in a bottle from your back room and whose grows out of her head. You know it the way a bank teller knows balances, professionally, silently, without appetite. And in the last 3 years, since the question started running in every magazine on your waiting table, your quiet knowledge has been promoted into an institution. Only her hairdresser knows for sure. You remember the first time you read that line, standing right by the dryers with the magazine folded back. Your first thought was, well, they've made me the safe, and they never asked the safe. Understand what the shop actually is in 1959 for the women who come to you for colour. It is the one room in their lives where the secret can breathe, and you have built the whole architecture of the room around protecting it. The colour appointments go in the book in your own shorthand, not tint, never tint. You write tea, or special, or nothing at all, just a name and a time. Because the book lies open on the desk and other women wait by the desk, and women can read upside down. Everyone can read upside down when it matters. Colour clients get the first slots of the morning or the last of the afternoon, the shop thin, the chairs empty, the same hours, though you have no way of knowing it, that the false name women chose in a Paris salon in 1907. 50 years of chemistry between that room and yours, and the clock of shame keeps the identical time. There is an etiquette, and you enforce it like a head waiter. When Mrs. 815 is at the basin with tint on her head and another customer comes early, you seat the early one facing the window. You have angled the third chair, physically angled it, so the basin can't be seen from the door. If two colour clients overlap, it happens. Life happens. Each pretends not to see what is on the other's head, and you conduct them past each other like a diplomat. And the silence in the shop for those 90 seconds has texture, has weight. You could set a cup on it. Nobody instructed anyone in these rules. The whole country wrote them together without a word, the way a country writes rules for elevators. And here is the part of your decade that the trade papers were full of and the ladies' magazines never mentioned. The box is eating your business, and you are furious about it, and your fury is complicated. When Miss Clairol went into the drugstores for anyone to buy, your profession howled. Meetings were held, the trade press thundered, hairdressers by the thousands saw the future, and the future was a woman in her own bathroom with a $1.50 box and no $8 retouch in your chair, 13 times a year. And you can do that arithmetic standing up. $8, 13 visits, better than $100 a year per head of the steadiest money in the business. Grey roots are more reliable than Christmas. Multiply the boxes in the drugstores by the chairs going quiet, and you are watching your retirement walk out of the shop in headscarves. But, and this is the joke history played on your profession, the same campaign that armed the bathroom insurgents also made you mythical. The slogan didn't say only Clairol knows, it said only her hairdresser knows, and that little genuflection turned every hairdresser in America into the licensed priesthood of the national secret. Women who bought the box still came to you to fix the box. The Thursday night chestnut brown gone flat or striped, or seeping orange at the temples. And they came sheepish, at closing time, the way a man who cut his own hair comes to the barber, and women who could afford it stayed with your chair precisely because the slogan had blessed the arrangement. The shop absorbed the box the way the church absorbed the printing press, grumbling, adapting, and keeping the confessional open. Because the confessional was never really about the chemicals, and you have always known it. What happens in your chair at 7:40 in the morning, with the tint developing and the timer going and nobody else in the shop, is that women talk. The husband whose eyes have started following the new girl at his office. The department floor where they hire pretty and promote young. The daughter who said, at Sunday dinner in front of everyone, "Mama, your hair's going grey," in the bright, innocent voice children save for detonations. You have heard every reason a woman in this decade colours her hair, and in 11 years of owning this shop you've almost never heard the reason be vanity. It is defence. It is dread with a shade name. They are not trying to be beautiful in your chair. They are trying to be safe, and there's no bottle for safe. So they buy sparkling sherry and hope. You could tell, if anyone asked you, nobody asks the safe, exactly what the stakes are, because your clients bring the stakes in weekly, like laundry. The stewardess who flew for one of the big airlines and knew her arithmetic cold, in that industry, in those years, a woman's flying career was built to end while she was still young. Carriers grounded stewardesses for marrying and pushed them out as they aged into their 30s and out the door. It would take until the hearings and lawsuits of the later 1960s for that machinery to even be questioned in public. She sat in your chair at 28 touching up a scatter of early silver, and she wasn't being vain. She was reading her own personnel file in the mirror. The saleswomen at the department stores, where the floor managers liked the counters staffed young and said so out loud in those exact words, in an era when a help-wanted page could still legally sort the world into columns. The secretaries, the widows job hunting at 50 who sat down in your chair and said, "Not make me beautiful," but the other sentence, the one you have heard so many times you could set it to music. "I can't walk in there looking like this." Grey, for the women of your shop, is not a colour. It is a verdict arriving early. The same silver that makes their husbands distinguished, that actually assists their husbands, softens him, credentials him, ushers him toward the corner office, reclassifies them. And when I say reclassifies, I need you to understand what that means in 1959. Not insulted. Removed. Moved, in the eyes of clerks and floor managers and dinner parties and sometimes their own kitchens, from the category of women things are still expected of into the category of women things are no longer expected of. Your clients are not fighting wrinkles in your chair. They are fighting a filing system. And the die works. That's the mercy of it and the trap of it. The die actually works. The verdict is actually deferred. 4 weeks at a time, at $1.50 a box or $8 a chair, for the rest of a woman's life. The advertising knew all of this, knew it cold, and said it. That's the thing a person forgets sitting here in the future. It said it in print, in cheerful type, next to the wholesome faces. The campaigns of those years talked right past the woman to her fears about her marriage and her paycheck, and they did it in copy so bouncy you could skip rope to it, and nobody blinked, because the fears were simply facts, and everyone knew the facts. And in 1957, the same pen that had written the question wrote a new jingle for a new Clairol product, loving care, a gentle rinse for exactly the customer too frightened of the word permanent, and the jingle asked America, in rhyme, hate that grey, wash it away, hate. Sit up and look at that word the way you'd look at a stranger in your shop. 30 years earlier, an American woman's grey was her crown of glory, at least from the pulpit. Now, the biggest beauty campaign in the country could open with the assumption, not the argument, the assumption that she hated it. That hating it was as standard as owning a broom. The question mark had done its work so well that the shame no longer needed to be sold. It could simply be referenced, the way you reference weather. Everybody hates the rain. Hate that grey. Wash it away. And the boxes moved by the millions, and your chairs stayed full after all, and somewhere under the hum of the dryers you understood that your whole trade, the shorthand in the book, the angled chair, the 7:40 appointments, the priesthood, was one small parish in something national now, something with headquarters. Headquarters was a corner office on Madison Avenue, and business there was extraordinary. Because Shirley Polykoff, having broken the market open with a question, spent the next decade and a half furnishing it, writing for Clairol product after Clairol product, the sentences that a whole generation of American women would hear in their heads while looking in mirrors. It is worth lining those sentences up in a row, in order like core samples, because you can read the entire climate of the age in them, layer by layer. In 1957, for Lady Clairol, the bleach and tone product, the full leap, not covering grey but changing flags entirely, she wrote, "Is it true blondes have more fun? Look at the engineering." Again a question. She almost never wrote a claim where a question would do, because a claim can be argued with and a question gets inside and answers itself. Again the deniable structure. The ad doesn't say become a blonde, it merely wonders, alongside you, whether the blondes at the beach are getting a better deal, and lets envy, which needs no copywriter, finish the paragraph. The blonde shade sold beyond every forecast. In an era when the pretty girl on every billboard and half the movie posters was golden, a bottle that asked, "Is it true?" was answering a question the culture had already spent 30 years asking on its own. Then, in the early 60s, the line that even people who have never heard Polykoff's name can finish. "If I've only one life, let me live it as a blonde." That one she pulled from her own private vocabulary. It was, she always said, the way she actually talked to herself. And you can hear it. The immigrant daughter's creed. One life, aimed at the mirror. Notice what has happened to the register. The 1956 question was defensive. Will I be caught? By the early 60s, the copy is existential. Is this my life? The shame is still there, but it has been turned inside out and worn as urgency. "You're not hiding anymore," says the sentence. "You're becoming." It sold in its decade, roughly the way scripture sells. And for loving care, the grey coverage rinse. The copy settled into the voice the 60s would remember. Hate that grey. Wash it away. And then, as the decade turned, a gentler, stranger, more total sentence. You're not getting older. You're getting better. Advertising had arrived at the point of telling American women that age in itself, not grey, not any particular hair, but time, the actual passage of time, was optional, deniable, a rumour. And in among the jingles, the quiet copy lines kept pointing at the two pillars this whole market stood on, the marriage and the paycheck. One loving care advertisement of the era promised, in as many words, that the product makes your husband feel younger too, just to look at you. There it is, in print, cheerful as a milkman. Your grey is not your business. Your grey is something that happens to him. Cover it for his sake, and for the office, and for the street, and for every eye whose verdict funds your life. That is what I meant at the start of the night when I said the trap was built. Not one villain twirling a moustache, 100 years of pieces, each clicking into the next. The pulpit supplied the shame, the chemist supplied the invisibility, the law supplied the fine print, and the agency supplied the sentences. Sentences so good, so warm, so easy to hum, that the trap came upholstered and smelled like moon gold, and 40 million women moved in. And they did move in. Let's say the numbers again slowly, because numbers this large stop meaning things unless you slow them down. In 1950, roughly 7 American women in 100 coloured their hair. By the early 1970s, it was more than 40 in 100, and by some industry counts, near half. The advertising budget behind Clairol went from $400,000 a year to $52 million inside 18 years. Hair colour went from a back curtain trade smaller than the chewing gum business to one of the great engines of the American drugstore. If you want a single image for it, in 1950, in a full church of 200 women, maybe 14 coloured their hair, and every one of them would have denied it. By 1972, in the same pews, it was 80 or 90, and every one of them would have denied it. Because that is the precise strange shape of the victory, and it is the thing I most want you to carry out of tonight. The number moved from 7 to nearly 50. The denial stayed at 100. The campaign had never asked women to stop being ashamed. Read the slogan again. It is a promise of concealment. Does she or doesn't she? Only her hairdresser knows. And so nobody stopped. The behaviour became a majority behaviour. practiced by the respectable centre of the country, by deacons' wives and den mothers, by the very women whose grandmothers had nodded at the Crown of Glory sermon. And it remained for every practitioner individually a secret, a nation of women doing the same thing behind the same locked doors, each still convinced, or half convinced, that being found out would cost her something she couldn't get back. Think about what that means for daily life. In the 60s, in any town in America, it means a bride dressing for her wedding, whose mother and grandmother and 2 aunts all carry shades of brown that come from the same drugstore aisle, and not one of the 5 has ever said so to another. It means a hospital room, and a daughter bringing her mother at her mother's urgent whispered request. Not slippers, not a bed jacket, but the box, smuggled in a knitting bag, applied over a hospital sink with the door wedged shut, because the surgeon is a young man and the ward nurses have eyes, and a woman is not going to lie there being 61 in front of strangers. It means widows who kept their colour appointments through their husbands' funerals, not from coldness, from its opposite, because the funeral had 400 eyes in it. It means, in millions of marriages, a running fiction so well maintained that men went to their graves genuinely believing their wives had gone charmingly, unusually, conveniently ungrey into their 50s, or men who knew perfectly well and understood that knowing was not the same as saying, and kept the treaty, and complimented the new rinse. And it means the mirror itself changed jobs. For the 7% nation, a mirror told a woman what she looked like. For the 50% nation, it told her what was due. The seam at the part, the glint at the temple in the rearview mirror on the school run, silver catching sun through a kitchen window in February. Everyone a small invoice, arriving 4 weeks apart, forever. Women of that generation developed a skill their granddaughters would have to be taught to even notice. The flick of the eyes to the part line in elevators, at bridge tables under fluorescent light at the market, reading each other's routes the way sailors read weather. Not cruelly most of the time, just automatically. The question had been installed at the national level, and it ran in the background in every room all the time. Does she? Doesn't she? Is it due? Can they tell? The women who ran that program in their heads were not fools, and it matters that you know that. They were the same women who ran payrolls in the war, who buried husbands and balanced ledgers and organised every church supper and PTA and blood drive in the country. They could read the trap fine. Many could have drawn you its blueprints. A woman in 1965 standing in the drugstore aisle with a box of loving care in her hand knew, in some accurate cellar of herself, that the cheerful jingle had her exact fear filed in its exact drawer, and that $1.50 was protection money, and that the protection racket had a tower on Madison Avenue and a laboratory in Stamford. She bought the box anyway, and she was right to buy it. And that is the whole cold heart of the thing. When the world docks real pay and real regard for grey hair, covering it isn't vanity and it isn't weakness. It's the correct move in a rigged game. The rig was the crime, and the rig was nobody's bathroom and everybody's culture, and the women got the bill either way, paid it in dollars at the register, or paid it in standing at the office, but paid. So who shamed them? Let's finally stack the answer up in one place. All of it. Name by name, the way you'd stack evidence, because you were promised names, and the truth is that the trap had flaws, and each flaw had a builder. The oldest flaw was there before any of our names. The conviction, old as proverbs and sharpened in 19th-century America, that a woman's worth was legible on her body, and that tampering with the evidence was fraud. The sermon that blessed Grey and damned the dye-pot, and thereby taught a century of women that their choices would be old or be false. On that floor the chemists built. TLA and Hugo with their peroxide at the fair in 1867. The coal tar men. Eugène Schueller over his stove in 1907, making dye safe and repeatable. Lawrence and Joan Gelb in 1931, carrying Clairol off the boat into the Depression. The Clairol chemists of 1950 folding the miracle into one bottle. None of them invented the shame. Every one of them made the hiding of it cheaper, safer, and more perfect, and sold the hiding knowingly as the product. And on the chemist's floor, the sentence makers built the top story. Foote, Cone and Belding, the agency. Clairol, the client, with its bath and its rinse and its shade names like candlelight. And at the typewriter, the immigrant's daughter from Brooklyn who had been audited across a dinner table in Yiddish and never forgot it. Shirley Polykoff, who took the question that pleases women and printed it 40 million times, unanswered, and in doing so turned a 7% secret into a 50% secret and called it, sincerely, liberation. That's the who. Chemists made it possible. One agency, one campaign, one copywriter made it moral. Moral by making it deniable, respectable by making it invisible. And the price of that particular route to respectability, the route that went through the locked bathroom instead of through the front door, was this: a generation of American women, the largest, busiest, most capable generation of women the country had yet produced, spent the middle of the 20th century pretending, not pretending to be beautiful, pretending to be unaltered, running next to every other job they held, the small silent night shift of the seam and the timer and the coffee grounds, 13 times a year, for decades, each alone, all together. Shirley Polykoff, for the record, never saw it as a trap, and her own life reads like the argument for the defence. The account she'd taken at $400,000 she left at $52 million. She retired a senior vice president. She put the question on the cover of her own memoir in 1975. Does she, or doesn't she? With the splinter finally, publicly, profitably out, she lived to 90 and died in 1998, with her slogans in the anthologies, credited by her whole industry as one of the greatest copywriters who ever worked. A woman who beat a business built to exclude her, using the exact wound it had given her as the tool. Every word of that is true, and none of it is small. And it is also true that the wound she monetized stayed open in everyone else. Both things sit in the record side by side, not cancelling. History is like hair. It doesn't come in only one shade. But every trap that runs on silence has the same weakness, and this one met its weakness in time. The weakness is one person, saying it out loud. It is 1972 now, and for the last time tonight, borrow young eyes. You are 26, and you grew up in that house on Long Island. You are, though neither of you has ever said a word about it, the daughter of the woman with the kitchen timer. You live in the city now, 3 roommates, a job at a publisher where the men your age are called editors and you're called a girl, at the same desk, doing overlapping work. That arithmetic is its own story. On the newsstands this year there is a brand new magazine called Ms. Its founders had put a preview issue into the world at the end of 1971 and watched it sell out. And in your apartment on any given Tuesday there are 6 women sitting on the floor doing the strange new thing the decade has invented, which is saying the quiet parts out loud, in rounds, like a song. And one Tuesday, the quiet part is hair. It starts as a joke, somebody's landlady, somebody's boss, and then one of the six, a serious woman who works at a hospital, says plainly that she found her first grey hairs last winter, 11 of them, and that she has decided to keep them. Just that. Keep them. And the room does something you will remember for years. It stops. 6 grown women, veterans by now of saying unsayable things about husbands and bosses and doctors, and the sentence "I am going to let my hair go grey" lands in the middle of the floor like something dropped, and everyone looks at it. And then everyone starts talking at once, and what comes out in pieces over 2 hours is the whole hidden machine. Your machine. The one this story has been assembling all night, dragged into a lit room by its handle. The mothers who died in secret for 30 years. The aunts. The question. The seam. The word that was never said at any family table. 6 women discover in one evening that all 6 grew up inside the same secret, each family believing it was theirs alone. The national whisper hearing itself for the first time at apartment volume. This is happening in 1972 and 1973 and 1974 in 1,000 apartments and dorm rooms and church basements. And it is the beginning of the countercurrent. Small, personal, unfunded, up against $52 million a year of moon gold, but real. The movement's writers take direct aim at the beauty industry as a system for manufacturing insecurity and selling it back at a markup. The phrase "the beauty trap" starts appearing in print. Some women, as a stated act, stop colouring and let the grey grow out in public, and grow it does, in that unforgiving way you now understand, a widening silver band announcing month by month exactly how long the pretense had run. Which is why doing it took a kind of nerve the slogans had never budgeted for. A woman who let it grow was not just going grey. She was untelling a lie in public, at ½ an inch a month, in front of everyone who'd ever complimented the rinse. You watch one do it. A senior woman at your publisher, one of the few with a real title, who arrives one September with her part line honest and silver and simply lets it come, through that autumn and winter, band by band, until by spring she is entirely, unapologetically, unmistakably grey and handsome as a lighthouse. The office processes it the way offices process everything sideways, remarks in the elevator, silences at meetings. She outlasts the remarks, and you notice, you 26 with not one grey hair yet, that you have started watching her the way your mother's generation watched the woman with the roses, watching to see if it can be done. The proof, as ever, walking around in plain sight. It could be done. It was never going to be done by everyone, or even most. The offices and the airlines and the marriages of 1974 had not read the essays. The 50% nation stayed a 50% nation, and the drugstore aisle kept humming. But the silence broke that decade, and the silence had been the load-bearing wall. After the 70s, a woman still might die. Most still did, but she could, increasingly, say so. The confession stopped being fatal. The hairdresser stopped being the only one who knew for sure. And the machine itself took 2 more hits in that decade, both worth a minute, because both rhyme with everything you've heard tonight. The first came from the laboratories, which is to say from the story's own basement. In the late 1970s, government-backed studies found that certain long-standing coal tar dye ingredients caused cancers in laboratory animals, and the FDA moved to slap warning language on the packages, and the industry, rather than wear the label, reformulated, pulling the suspect molecules and swapping in others. The details are chemistry. The shape is the point. and the shape is 1938 all over again. The dark bottle, still legally privileged, still too big to ban, still being renovated in flight 40 years on. Grandmothers who had trusted the bottle behind the tea-coloured curtain had granddaughters reading newspaper stories about what the bottle might have carried. The trade survived it, as the trade survives everything. But the last innocence of the box, the little post-war faith that the men in the lab coats had surely checked, went out with that decade's trash, and the second hit wasn't a hit at all. It was a mirror held up, and it is my favourite bitter footnote in this entire 100 years. In 1961, a company had launched a grey coverage product for men, Grecian formula, the drugstore staple of 1 million bathroom cabinets, and its active ingredient, the thing that did the actual work, was lead acetate, sugar of lead, the lead comb friends, the exact chemistry our Brooklyn merchant's wife bought with the egg money in 1871, the chemistry the Chamber of Horrors put under glass in 1933, alive and well and sold openly to American men through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, past the year 2000 perfectly legally, until the FDA finally banned lead acetate from hair products in 2018. 2018. And here is the part that tells you everything about who was shamed and who was not. The men's product never needed a Polykoff. No question mark, no hairdresser sworn to secrecy, no denial engineered into the copy. The men's advertising cheerfully described gradual change, a little at a time, no sudden difference, which is deniability too, of course. But deniability sold with a shrug, over the counter, in daylight, to customers whose careers grey hair had never threatened. Men got the lead and were spared the shame. Women got the safer chemistry and paid for it in secrecy for 50 years. If you ever want to explain to someone how a culture can hide an entire system of judgment inside a drugstore aisle, you can do it with those two shelves, 4 feet apart. So that is where the great machine stood by the time the century turned tired. Still enormous, bigger than ever, in dollars, but leaking its silence. The daughters of the timer and towel generation died or didn't, said so or didn't, and mostly could not fully imagine, because their mothers mostly never told them, what the locked door decades had actually felt like from inside. Which is the last quiet cost of the whole affair, and then I'll let the machinery rest. The secrecy worked so well that it erased its own history. A woman who spent 31 years and 400 boxes maintaining an unbroken chestnut fiction left, by definition, no evidence, no diary entry, no confession. Nothing but a rag bag of stained towels her family threw out unexamined when they sold the house. Multiply her by 20 million. The 20th century's largest coordinated act of concealment, conducted by its most documented generation, is almost nowhere in the record, because succeeding at it meant leaving no record. All that survives is the advertising, the question, smiling out of the bound volumes of a life in every library, does she or doesn't she, as if it didn't know she did. That's the answer, for the record. Across about 40 years and several 100 million boxes, she did, and she had her reasons, and you have spent tonight inside them. The night is getting late now, and the story is nearly out of century. So let's do what we always do at this hour. Walk back through the rooms, quietly, and turn off the lights one at a time and say what became of everyone. The real ones first, because the real ones have dates. Eugène Schueller worked until nearly the end, and died in 1957, the year after the question broke in America, having lived just long enough to see the market he'd bet his future on in 1907 finally, completely arrive. The little society of inoffensive hair dyes he founded with a stove and a sample case grew into L'Oréal, which grew into the largest beauty company on the face of the earth, selling in every country there is. The Halo brand outlived the man by a margin no one at that wet Tuesday salon call could have dreamed. Lawrence Gelb lived until 1980, long enough to watch the company he'd carried home from France in the worst year of the Depression become an American institution. His son Richard, who had helped drive Miss Clairol into the world, went on to run not just Clairol, but the whole of Bristol Myers, one of the great corporate careers of his generation. And Shirley Polykoff, as you already know, wrote her way from the Brooklyn dinner table to the top of Madison Avenue and died in 1998, at 90, with the question for a title on her memoir and a place in advertising's Hall of Fame. The audit she'd once failed in Yiddish reversed, notarized, and framed. The others, the merchant's wife with the comb, the manicurist behind the tea-coloured curtain, the hairdresser with the angled chair, the woman on the pink tile, the daughter on the apartment floor. They have no dates, because as I told you at the start, they were never single women. They were thousands at a time, wearing one face for the night so you could stand where they stood. Whoever they each were, history closed gently over them, the way water closes. The combs went into junk drawers and then into landfills, the appointment books into stove fires when the shops changed hands, the stained towels into rag bags, the secrets into the ground with their keepers, unconfessed and in the end, unneeded. If you want a monument to them, there isn't one. There is only the fact, visible in any old photograph of any crowd of American women between 1956 and 1990, that so few heads in the picture are grey, and almost nobody who looks at such photographs today ever asks why. You'll ask now. That's the monument. You're it. And the woman with the timer, since you have worn her eyes the longest, you're owed her ending, composite though she is. So let it stand for all of them. Time gave her the twist it gave that whole generation. She kept the appointment 13 times a year, through the 60s and the 70s and into the 80s, through the daughter's wedding, where the photographs show a chestnut-haired mother of the bride of 58, and no one ever asked, and she'd have had her 2 words ready if anyone had. And then somewhere past 70, the husband gone by then, the house smaller, the street's eyes fewer and dimmer and mostly new. There came a 4-week mark, some ordinary Thursday, when she looked at the silver seam at her part and simply did not drive to the drugstore. Not a declaration. Nothing from the essays. She never read the essays. She was tired, and it was raining, and the girl at the register was somebody's granddaughter who called everyone dear regardless. And the seam widened that month, and the month after, half an inch at a time, undoing 30 years at the same speed they'd been done. It took a year and a half to grow all the way out the way it always does. And at the end of it, in the hall mirror, stood a white-haired woman, genuinely white, a white she'd never met because she'd never once let it arrive. And she stood there a long moment turning her head under the light, the old habit, hunting for the tell. And there wasn't one. There was just her, whoever she was at last, in any light at all. Her granddaughters live in a different weather, not a solved one. Let's not tuck the century in with a fairy tale. The aisle is still 40 feet long. The industry is global and enormous. Most American women still colour. The office arithmetic never fully retired, and the question can still walk into any room and lower its voice. But the silence is broken for good, and it stayed broken. Somewhere in the last stretch of years, the countercurrent got its own name and its own pride. Women in their 30s choosing silver on purpose, out of a bottle, as a fashion, paying to put in the exact shade their grandmothers paid 40 years of thirsties to take out. Women in their 50s posting the grow out month by month, seam and all, in public, on purpose. The widening silver band worn like a medal and cheered by strangers. The precise image that was once proof of the crime, now the whole point. The hairdressers still keep what they know out of the old courtesy. But it is a courtesy now. It stopped being a hiding place. One Tuesday night conversation at a time, and it never went back to being one. So the trap rusted. It didn't vanish. Traps this old don't vanish, but the teeth no longer meet. A woman going grey in America today walks past the shade names. Still there, still lovely, still weather. And the question mark on the old campaign sits in the archive where the historians can point at it, and students read the 13 words in seminar rooms and take a moment every class to work out why they were ever powerful, which is the softest fate a weapon can have. Does she or doesn't she? She'll tell you herself now if you ask. Mostly you don't need to ask. Mostly at last it is just hair. And that, all of it, is why American women started hiding their grey. Because a century taught them, pulpit by parlour by drugstore shelf, that grey was a verdict, and who shamed them into it. The culture that wrote the verdict, the chemists who perfected the hiding, and the one brilliant, wounded, triumphant copywriter who made the hiding respectable by making it deniable, and sold the locked door to 40 million women as a key. The story's over. The night isn't. Stay with me a little longer and we'll let it all settle where it belongs, because every room we visited tonight has a night of its own, and the kind way to leave a century is to leave it sleeping. So go back one last slow time and don't stop anywhere long. Brooklyn, 1871, the bedroom on the quiet street. The lamp is out now, the house ticking as it cools, and the comb lies wrapped in its tissue in the second drawer, under the good gloves, doing no harm tonight, just being heavy in the dark. Down the hall the children breathe in their different rhythms, and the merchant snores his merchant snore, and the woman lies awake a while the way she always does, listening to the horse traffic thin out on the avenue, one cart, then a long nothing, then one more. The grey at her temple is silver in the streetlight, and nobody is awake to read it. Frost is coming. The egg money is short. The winter will be the winter. She sleeps. Let her sleep. Paris, 1907. The 2-room flat. Past midnight now, and the stove is finally cooling, and the smell of the evening's batch, sharp, chemical, hopeful, is settling into the curtains, where it will live for years. The bottles stand in their crate by the door in rows, corked and labelled in a careful hand, numbered shades waiting for morning like a choir waiting for a downbeat. The young chemist has fallen asleep at the table again, cheek on the ledger, pencil still in his fingers, and the figures under his cheek do not add up yet, and won't for another year, and will after that add up for 100 years and counting. The city murmurs down the boulevard. A last cab. A shutter. Let him sleep too. He has calls to make at 7. Herald Square, 1922. The parlour after closing. Chairs up. Floor swept. The tea-coloured curtain pulled back at last so the back room can air. The dryers cool and click. The manicurist walks home through the electric evening with her stained fingertips in her coat pockets, past theatres letting out, past hair the shade of brass in the marquee light, and she is too young and too tired to know she is a chapter in anything. The widow's face healed, by the way. Most of them healed. The ones who didn't, the law finally heard about 16 years too slow, the way you heard about them tonight. The exhibit cases in Washington are dark. The photographs sleep in their folders. The bad bottles under glass keep their poisons to themselves. Evidence now, harmless now, history now. The convention hall, 1950, swept and vast and echoing. The folding chairs stacked. The stage bare where the grey-haired model sat down and the future stood up. Halls like that are the same everywhere after the show. A smell of floor wax and cold coffee, one janitor, acres of quiet. Somewhere in the dark of it, if you like, you can imagine the trick everyone came back to find, still nowhere to be found. There was no trick. There was only 70 years of stoves and sample cases, and then 20 minutes, and then everything after. And the pink-tiled bathroom on Long Island, 1956, ours, yours. Midnight now. The ammonia has faded to a rumour. By Sunday it will be gone entirely. The towel is deep in the hamper. The box is deep in the trash can under the coffee grounds. The timer is back in the kitchen drawer being an innocent kitchen timer. And the house has folded itself up for the night around its new secret as easily as around its old ones. Houses are good at this. It's most of what houses are for. In the dark of the bedroom, the woman lies listening to her husband breathe and touches her own hairline once, lightly, the way you touch a locked door in passing, just to feel it hold. It holds. 28 days it holds. And the street holds its street-sized silence, lawn after lawn after lawn, and behind how many of those dark identical windows the same secret lies folded in the same way, she will never know, and neither will they, and that was the whole design. Every woman her own locked room and a nation of locked rooms, all beginning now to dream. The shop in Queens locks up at 6 in winter. The book with its shorthand goes in the drawer. The angled chair faces the window all night, reflecting the streetlight, keeping its counsel like everything else in there. What that room knew, it never told, and now there is no one left to tell, and so it becomes what all kept secrets become eventually. Not a burden, just a stillness. A shop-shaped stillness with your name on the glass in gold. And the apartment floor in 1972 empties by 11. The 6 women go home by subway and bus through the lit city, each carrying the evening's discovery like a coal in a pocket, warm, a little dangerous, alive. The serious one from the hospital kept her 11 grey hairs, if you're wondering, and all the rest that followed. Whoever she was, and she was thousands, the weather she helped change is the weather now. That's every room. That's the whole 100 years put to bed. And do you notice, now that all the doors are shut and all the lamps are out, how alike the rooms are in the dark? Different decades, different chemistry, different verdicts hanging over them, and at night, from inside, every one of them comes down to the same few honest things. A body tired from the day, a secret or two folded somewhere close, streets going quiet outside, and sleep arriving anyway, on schedule. The one appointment nobody has ever needed to hide. Because here is the gentlest fact in this whole ungentle story, and it's the one I want you to fall asleep holding. Through all of it, the lead and the silver, the curtain and the question, the seam and the timer, the $52 million and the 2 words at the kitchen counter, through every year of the whole rigged century, night still came the same way for everyone. The peroxide blonde and the deacon's wife, the copywriter and the woman she wrote at, the hairdresser and the woman in her chair, the shamed and the shameless and the ones who did the shaming without ever once noticing they were doing it. Every night, each one of them lay down, and their hair, dyed, grey, growing out, growing in, betraying them, protecting them, whatever it had been doing all day in the courtroom of other people's eyes, their hair just lay there on the pillow, off duty, being what it had been all along underneath the arguments. Dead soft keratin, warm from the scalp, smelling faintly of the day. Not evidence, not a verdict, just hair. The eyes that judged it are closed at night, all of them. They always were. And the years went by the way years go. The autumns came, and the drugstore windows changed their displays, and the boxes moved by the millions, and the winters came, and silver caught the low sun through kitchen windows in 50 million houses, and the 4-week marks fell due, and were met or missed, and the springs came, and the brides' mothers checked their part lines in the vestibule mirrors, and the summers came, and the beaches asked their question about blondes, and answered it themselves. Season after season, appointment after appointment, decade after decade, the great secret machine hummed along under American life, and then, slowly, at half an inch a month, in 10 million bathrooms at once, it began to be allowed to stop. Not everywhere, not all at once. But you've seen how this story moves. One demonstration at a fair, one sample case in the rain, one sentence in a magazine, one woman at a publisher letting September come in silver. Everything in this century happened one room at a time and then was everywhere. Let the machine hum itself quiet now. Let the aisle go dark at the end of the drugstore. The little gallery of smiling question mark women keeping their poses all night for nobody. Let the presses that printed the question run down and stop, and the bound volumes sleep in the libraries, and the archive keep the 13 words safe where they can be studied and can't get out. Let the last 4-week mark of the evening fall due somewhere in the dark and go unmet. Just this once, just tonight, because the woman it belonged to fell asleep on the couch before the news, and the seam can wait. Everything can wait. 28 days is a long time, and tonight is only tonight. And someday, this happened, is happening, will go on happening in 1,000 towns. A granddaughter clears out a house. You know the kind of afternoon. Dust in the window light, the truck coming Saturday, everything into boxes marked keep and give and go. And in the back of the bathroom cabinet, behind the aspirin and the mystery ointments, she finds it. One box of hair colour, unopened, the shade called something like candlelight, bought for a 4-week mark that never came due. And she stands there holding it, this small cardboard thing lighter than a paperback, and she does the arithmetic on the dates, and understands dimly, in the way we understand our grandmothers, which is to say 2 generations too late, that she is holding the last round of an engagement that ran longer than most wars. 13 a year, say 30 years, say 400 boxes, 400 locked doors, 400 muffled timers, and this one, the 401st, unneeded at last. She doesn't know the history you now know. She just stands in the dustlight a moment longer than the aspirin warranted, and then puts the box gently, not into go, but into keep, not knowing why, which is how houses vote on what mattered. That's where the century keeps its secret now. In the keep boxes, in the pause before the trash bag, in photographs where nobody's grey and no one thinks to ask. It's safe there. It can sleep there. So can you. Count the shades if you're still drifting. They're better than sheep and they belong to you now. Moon gold, topaz, sparkling sherry, chestnut brown. Say them slow, one to a breath. The whole beautiful, dishonest paint box of the 20th century, out of the trash and into the dark where all colours are the same colour. Moon gold, and a lawn going silver with frost. Topaz and a streetlight through a shop window. Gold letters on glass. Sherry, and the last lamp on the street going out, and no one awake to be seen, and no one awake to see. And count the Thursdays if you need more, but count them backwards, the way the century finally learned to. The last Thursday first, rain, the drugstore unvisited, the seam beginning, and nothing happening. Nothing at all happening. That's the miracle at the end of this story, the quietest ending any story of mine has ever had. A woman didn't do a thing, and the sky held. Then the Thursday before that, and the one before that, each with its timer, each with its coffee grounds, each folding shut like the day it lived in, folding backwards now, box into bag, bag into drawer, drawer into shop, shop into street, street into decade, decade into the dark you're lying in, which holds all of it easily, the way night holds a town. The seasons go around one more time as you drift. Autumn, the school-run mornings, the rear-view mirror, the low sun through the windshield, and a glint at the temple that no one, hear it now, truly, no one was ever really watching for as hard as she thought. Winter, the kitchen window, the February light, the silver it found, and the kettle on anyway, and the day going on anyway the way days do. Spring, the vestibule mirrors, the brides, the part lines checked one last time, and behind every checked part line, a woman who was loved by people who never once thought about her hair. At the moment it mattered, at the bedside, at the graveside, at the door, at midnight when it counted, nobody on this earth has ever been loved 1 ounce less for a seam of silver, and the whole $52 million question never once changed that, and never could. And summer, the beaches, the question about blondes, the fun that was had or wasn't, and the tide coming in over all of it, evening after evening, the great impartial rinse, taking the footprints of the watchers and the watched alike, smoothing the sand flat and asking it nothing. And if some part of you is still awake enough to wonder what to do with all this, because that's the last thing a mind does before sleep, it asks for instructions, then here are yours, and they are easy. You don't have to do anything with it. That's not what these stories are for. But the next time you're somewhere ordinary, a checkout line, a waiting room, a Thanksgiving table, and you see a woman with a head of silver she's plainly stopped apologizing for, you might know now, in a way you didn't yesterday, what that head of hair has walked through to be worn like that in public. 100 years of sermons and shade cards, a question printed 40 million times, an aisle 40 feet long, humming with names like candlelight, and her at the end of all of it, just standing in the checkout line thinking about dinner, magnificently unaware of being a monument. You don't have to say anything to her. Monuments don't need telling. Just know it. Knowing is the only tribute any of the women in this story ever actually wanted, and the one thing the whole century was arranged to keep from them, to be accurately seen and charge nothing for it. And the next time you find the first one of your own, because you will, everyone does, at the crown or the temple, in the unforgiving light above some sink far in your future, or already in your past, you'll have company in the mirror. You know them all now. The merchant's wife will be there, counting to 9 and stopping. The manicurist, who saw what secrecy cost at compress range, and kept her lady's name out of it anyway. The hairdresser, angling the chair, writing her kind shorthand. The woman with the timer and the woman with the roses who, I'll tell you now since it's late and secrets are ending, was never lucky. Of course she wasn't lucky. She had a Thursday of her own, and a different drugstore 2 towns over in the other direction, and a rag bag in her own garage, and 3 years of sitting across a kitchen table from her best evidence wondering. 2 women, 1 street, each the proof that broke the other's loneliness if either could have said 1 sentence out loud. That sentence took the country another 20 years. You get to say it whenever you like. That's what you inherited, and it cost you nothing, and it cost them everything. And that's what inheriting is. So look at the first silver one, whenever it comes, however many of its friends it eventually invites, and say what none of them could say at the mirror, alone, at 7 in the morning, in the middle of the century of the question. Say, there you are, not there it is, there you are. Right on time. Nothing showing that shouldn't. Nothing to hide that ever needed hiding. And then go make the coffee, because it's only hair, it was always only hair, and the day, unlike the aisle, has never once asked you to be any particular shade before it would have you. That's the whole instruction. That's everything I have. The rest is just the falling asleep, and you're nearly there already. You're tired now. That's all right. That's the idea. You've been carrying 100 years since the lamp came on. A comb with too much weight in it, a curtain the colour of weak tea, a stove in Paris, a sample case in the rain, a locked door, a muffled timer, a question in italics, an answer that wasn't one. Set them down now, one at a time, the way the century finally set them down. The comb in its drawer, the curtain on its rod, the stove gone cold, the case shut, the door. Leave the door unlocked, actually. It can stay unlocked now. That was the point of everything. And the question, the one that started in Yiddish at a Brooklyn dinner table and ended up printed 40 million times. Say it once more, last thing, and feel how little is left inside it at this hour. Does she or doesn't she? Say any words often enough, at night, slowly, and they come apart into sounds, and the sounds come apart into breath, and breath is all it ever was. Somebody else's breath, worrying about somebody else's hair, a long time ago, far from your bed. It has no jurisdiction here. Nothing does. This is the room where nobody's counting. So let it come now, the way it comes. Let sleep take you the way it took the merchant's wife when the last cart had passed on the avenue, and the way it took the chemist with his cheek on the ledger, and the tired manicurist, and the hairdresser behind her gold-lettered glass, and the woman on Long Island with her hand fallen away from her hairline, door after door after door down the whole long street of the century, every one of them held, every one of them safe until morning. Let the rooms fade. Let the labels fade. The restorers and the baths and the rinses, moon gold, topaz, sparkling sherry, all the beautiful names for hiding, fading now like shade cards left in a sunny window, gentler and gentler, until the names let go of their colours and the colours let go of you. Let the noise quiet. The vendors and the dryers and the presses and the jingles. Hate that grey, wash it away, only her hairdresser, does she or doesn't she? All of it running down now like a music box, slower and slower and softer and sweeter, until the question is just a hum. And the hum is just the house. And the house is just the night. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You're, and hear this the way the century cannot manage to say it to the women you walked beside tonight. So let it be said, at least to you, plainly. With nothing to sell, You're enough, as found, as is, in whatever shade the morning finds you. Centuries will pass. The aisles you know will change beyond recognition. The bottles will become something else, and the questions will become other questions, and the mirrors will go on doing what mirrors do, which is exactly nothing, which was always exactly nothing, only glass, only light, only whoever is standing there looking back. But people will still lie down at night beside their secrets and find the secrets way less in the dark. Still touch a door in passing just to feel it hold. Still be, under everything they colour and everything they can't, precisely who they are. All the way down, all night long. Some things don't change. The rest, the verdicts, the seams, the questions in italics. The rest is weather, and weather passes, and you're indoors now, and the window is dark, and the storm you heard about all evening ended years and years ago. Tomorrow there will be light, and mirrors, and whatever the mirrors say. Tomorrow there will be aisles and appointments, and the whole bright machinery of being seen. But that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this bed, this breath, this slow unclenching, the day's last thoughts coming apart into sounds, the sounds into breath, the breath into nothing at all. You've earned this rest. Every one of them earned it. All those women, all those Thursdays, and it came with them anyway, earned or not, free of charge, the one thing on any shelf in this whole story that never cost a secret. Take it. Let your thoughts go grey now. Soft grey, kind grey, the grey of first light before anyone's awake to see, the one shade nobody ever had to hide, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.